Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are doing it. We are going to be doing regular album reactions. And we're going to start off this little process. Well, technically, I guess we started off with Between the Buried and Me's Colors back in January. But now that the process is solidified, guaranteed every other week, we're going to begin with Agalloch's Ashes Against the Grain. So, let's dive into this. The album is about an hour long. I have analysis to add to it, my reactions. We're probably looking at an hour and 45, maybe a 2-hour video. So, there's chapter selection at the bottom, and hopefully this doesn't get blocked. I suppose that's the best I could say. Let's get into this. We're going to start with their first one. Whenever I can find a break, I'm going to pause and discuss things, but like I did with the Between the Buried and Me video, I'm going to not stop if tracks run into each other, and I'm really hoping we don't see a lot of that here, because I do want to interject thoughts, and unlike with the Between the Buried and Me, if it comes down to it, 4 songs in or something, we get halfway through the album and there's still no breaks, I'm probably going to pause it anyways, because I want to make sure that my thoughts are articulated in a respectable time against what I'm listening. So we'll see how it goes. All right, this is only the second time we're doing this, so we'll just see what happens. First track is called Limbs. Oh, and we will be listening to the 2016 remaster. It's really weighty, it's really in this moment. It's exploring the single idea, the single topic, without any urgency to move on. It's interesting, there is elements of beauty in here. Like I mentioned, there's definitely a weightiness to this section. A lot of that's coming from the real rigid rhythmic structure present and the wall of sound element. But that guitar line has hope, love, something very uplifting about that guitar melody amidst, like I said, the weight of the section. And now we have some instability, some doubt. Yeah, what a really effective idea here. Very simple too. These quarter note hits with the delayed or reverberated eighth notes on the other guitar. Just a real simple building of rhythmic ideas. And once again, we have this weight. The bass has a little bit of presence here. Okay. And for being Wall of Sound, it's actually a very clean production. And once again, we kind of bring back this hopeful, this brighter, uplifting melody line on top of the weight of that wall of sounds, that post-metal vibe. And we have these black metal vocals as well. Really, as far as I'm concerned, running opposition to that guitar line. A huge shift. This isn't just a clean electric. We've shifted to an acoustic guitar and have introduced a somber chordal idea. And immediacy. We've seen a lot of really smooth transitions, and this was an immediate jump. Really getting into some tense ideas here. The vocals also have a lot of presence. Very loud compared to the music. little variations like bringing in that tom run there. Oh, caught me off guard. Once again, a bit of an uplifting element here. But this one also seems to be lacking that wall of sound, at least in the moment. Bass is very dominant right here too, a lot more so than in the wall of sound section. Ugh. Like if post-metal went pop-punk. What? Yeah, drastic shift from what we heard earlier. This is phenomenal. We've actually gotten rid of that really rigid quarter note rhythm stuff we saw in the first one. To some really playful rhythm. Just really listen to what the drums are doing. We're getting some syncopation in the bass kick against the snare that's coming down and every downbeat. And that syncopation is really making it a bit more bouncier than the last song's heavy rigidity. Bring it into halftime. And the bass really filling in this lower end. Love hearing the bass more than we did last time. And I think even the production's a little different here. We don't have that centered wall of sound. It's kind of wide. We have a lot of sound that's kind of pushed to the sides to make way for the melody in the middle, rather than the melody trying to fight against everything else. And the chords that are going on the outside there are really trying to emphasize some instability, but I think a lot of the fuzz is covering it up, and I don't think it's as contrasting with that upbeat melody line as it should be. If we look at the raw notes. We have shifted away from those funkier drum rhythms though, back into this really rigid, emphasizing downbeats idea. As soon as I say that, of course. It's interesting also too with this reverb and these syncopated bass kicks, has a very like modern rock vibe to it. Love that really prominent ride as well. It's like front, center, left maybe, and it's very bright, very forward, and it's really nice to cut through everything else. It's so weird when they pull this groove out of nowhere. And back to the pop punk stuff. Subtle changes too. We've opened up the hi-hat here. Interesting decision. I always talk about contrast. This is what I'm talking about. Every time that groove comes in, after those extended moments of rigidity, it feels so good. All right, we're gonna pause it there for a moment and talk about this for a second. So both of these songs seem to be two sides of the same coin almost. I'm gonna dive into the lyrics in a little bit and see if there's anything going on there. But the first one is about geez, it's like this. I don't even know how to explain it. They take that sort of weighty, oppressive wall of sound post metal style, and utilize that as a backdrop for a bright, uplifting, positive guitar melody in several situations. The guitar melody actually changes. They use several of them against this backdrop. It is the core aspect of that title track, I mean, the first track, Limbs. And it almost feels like finding positivity in the darkness, or possibly when you are struggling, when you have something difficult at hand, right? That would be the oppressive weight of the post metal stuff. To remember things that make you happy, or to that shine a light upon things, right? And to kind of hum a happy song, so to speak, seeing as it's this melody line that sits above this weight, and it will pull you out of it. That's kind of what I'm getting from that opening song. It's an extended moment of that. But I think it's really interesting when we remove that bright melody line and we look at just the wall of sound. It's not super oppressive. This isn't like what we checked out. Um, well, I can't actually think of any oppressive wall of sound stuff we've checked out recently. But yeah, it doesn't have that crushing weight to it. It's definitely a wall of sound. It's a very full sound. It sounds like it's multi-layered. We have a lot of width to it. It kind of pans, or it kind of expands from the full left to right panning. It is just, it's filling up the entire sound sphere, but it's not oppressive. It's not weighty. We have the tropes there, but they're just not done to the same effect that we've heard other bands do in the past. And this is most likely by design. I don't think it's supposed to sound oppressive. It's just supposed to, or I don't think it's supposed to be oppressive. It's not supposed to be brutal. It's just supposed to feel like it, to imply it. And I think it's interesting because there is a brightness to it. I think if we looked at how this was EQ'd against other style or other songs that utilize this wall of sound style, we're going to see that there's a lot more high end in this song than in other tracks, which really want that low end weight. They want that lower element to make it feel like the songs are heavier, like legitimately physically heavier, to really make it feel like you're being crushed under the weight of these constant attacks. Under this sonic weight, so to speak. And that's not so happening here. It's more of the impression of it, right? We still have the 16th note double bass kicks, the 16th note tremolo picking. We have the very wide, very tall wall of sound with the layering and the spaciousness of it. But it's sort of brighter. It's not really digging into any of the heavy dissonance that some of these bands utilize. It's kind of just allowing itself to be. It is what it is. There's elements of it that feel more aggressive than other songs. A lot of that just comes down to the fact that we have all these 16th note hits constantly. But it's not super weighty, super heavy. It's sort of more of a lightweight, a lightweight, a weight that is light though. It's definitely there, but it's not insurmountable. It's interesting that that's paired with this brighter melody because, when I was listening to the song, I felt like it was this this brightness, this light at the end of the tunnel kind of idea. But I'm not sure that the wall of sound element really is the tunnel. It's a difficult part in life, I would say, for sure, but I'm not sure that it is, like being in a dark tunnel for a while. I don't know. We're going to keep exploring this. I think my ideas on this are going to continuously evolve, especially since they're utilizing a very similar sound here, but mixing it up with pop rock ideas, and it's completely changing my relationship to their wall of sound approach. It's interesting how they continue to contrast it while still having this bright EQ and, higher end element sitting above everything that's going on there. I also want to talk about this idea of oh, not an idea actually. I kind of I kind of mix those two together. We're gonna move on to the production though. I want to talk about this real quick. I've already sort of touched on it with the EQ idea, but it's clean, right? Very clean. We checked out Krallis yesterday's Thursday, and that is kind of what I expect when we get this wall of sound stuff, is just this heavy layer of fuzz above everything that is creating this wall of distortion, of dissonance. No, not of dissonance, of distortion, this fuzz, this static that sits above everything. That's something that I really relate to, or kind of have related to this style of music, because the notes themselves are not really enough to feel weighty, beefy, meaty. This largeness to it, right? That's the whole thing about Wall of Sound and this style of post metal or post rock, is that it's a very large sound that doesn't seem to stop. That's where the weightiness comes from. It's a mixture of the attacks, the frequency of the attacks, and the production on it, right? You want those really loud snare hits that cut through everything. You want those bass kicks that feel like a heartbeat. They're just punching right through. And then you want that distortion, that fuzz, that metal edge on your guitars to create that extra layer of sound, because a lot of this deals with layering, whether it's ensuring that you have a wide layer, adding in reverb, or layering up the same idea but panning it left and right, and maybe even having a third take of it centered, so that you have this full production of this one sound, but then also vertically layering it with different instruments or different sounds. You might have your guitars and your bass and the fuzz, and then the vocals, and maybe you've actually put some compression on the vocals too, and then your drums, and they have compression. And these are all layers that are helping it stack higher and higher and sound like a huge sound. And, some of those elements are here. It is fuzzy, it is wide, it is tall. There's a lot of layers going on, but it's clean. It's missing a lot of that grittiness that I kind of associate with this as an extra layer to it, right? I can hear some of the notes going on. And I think some of it also, because I did mention that the chords did not come through as strongly as they should have, or at least not to get the intention. And I thought a lot of that was in the production of it. I don't know. Maybe it's not that there's less fuzz. Maybe there's less chord timbre. So if you imagine that the fuzz, the distortion, the overdrive, the compression, all the cracklingness that happens with the notes sits above the note. And I would say most times that we've listened to something akin to this, it's been equal. About an equal amount of static to, the noise that it makes when you strum the guitar, the core timbre of the instrument. But what if you had the fuzz and then the instrument, right? So the majority, when you actually hit the strings on your guitar, when you strike them, cause them to vibrate, they make sounds. What if 60% of that noise was replaced with the static? it would give more weight to the static element, especially with the fact that you're tremolo picking. You're hitting these things real fast, and you're getting also a lot of the core attack in there as well. You're not getting much of the sustain or the fade off, the release. So not only do you have this extra fuzz on top of this note that you've slowly gotten rid of, you don't have the whole note there, but you also have the attack on there. And something, when you play notes for longer periods of time, right? So maybe you're playing a whole note or a half note, it's taking up 2 to 4 beats rather than a quarter of a beat like the 16th notes are. You have your attack, and that's going to be the harshest part of the note. Then you have your sustain, which is one of the softer parts, and then your release, which is how it ends. Now, there can be an abruptness to this, but there usually isn't much of a harsh element. You can end a note very sharply, or you can fade it out, but there isn't this harsh hit like when you begin a note and you say two, two, do. You get that very harsh attack on it. And you can soften it. That's what we call legato style with your do 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 do. It's a lot softer than two 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 two, but it still has a bit of extra emphasis at the beginning. No matter how soft you make it, there needs to be a moment where the silence is cut through. The only way to really go around this is digitally. We can we can cut off the attack in software. It sounds weird. Most people don't realize it, but attacks are something that we subconsciously understand of how music works. Notes do not just appear out of thin air. They, emerge into sound, so to speak. We're used to hearing that. So these extra attacks, especially when you're doing 4 attacks, 4 notes per beat, that is also a prominent part of the sound that's going to be overpowering the note as well. Normally, this happens anyways, but when I think when they reduce the volume of that core timbre, it's being overpowered by both the attack and the fuzz and distortion and compression that they have on top of it. And all of this is coming together to a style of sound that they're creating where I can hear that they're playing chords, but I can't really hear the chords. I can hear that there's some movement sometimes, but I think there was one moment where chords 1 and 2 of the phrase only changed the middle notes. So if we're working with triads, which I think they are, we have our lowest note, our highest note, and our middle note. And if you change the middle note, you can actually change the mode that you're working within. And there's actually some really cool chord progressions that really only move one note at a time. You can actually get some really cool progressions out of doing this as a chain. Maybe you move the middle note, and then the highest note, and then the third bar you move the lowest note, and you kind of piecemeal transform this chord into your final resolving chord. And it's some really cool stuff. But here, I think they were doing that, but the effects of these smaller movements are not really shining through in the limited timbre that's actually coming through in the mix. And I'm going to wager it's intentional. I'd say for better or worse. I don't know that it creates a specific sound, right? And it's obviously what they were going for. But at least to me, especially in the first song, I really like this contrast between some of the tension that they're creating, or that I think they're aiming to create in the chords, and the uplifting elements in the lead line, in the lead guitar melody. And it's not shining through. I think the tension plus the wall of sound is a phenomenal counterpoint to, well, not a counterpoint in the idea that it's a counter melody, but a counterpart of the song to what that lead melody is doing. The oppression and the instability and the tension that's being introduced there with this bright uplifting melody, and that part's not really shining through. And I think that's kind of where some of my talking points in my previous section, looking at atmosphere and emotion and stuff like that, I was kind of waffling back and forth, and that's because I'm trying to come to terms with what I'm hearing in the wall of sound versus what I think the wall of sound should be, or how I would interpret it if the notes themselves were given more prominence in the mix. So I think there's some really cool ideas at play here. I think they actually performed some really cool ideas. I think when we look on the sheet music, there's some really cool ideas. But some of that is being overshadowed by the production, and it's probably intentional. So I don't know. I don't want to say that it's a bad idea. They aimed for something. They achieved what they were aiming for, and they have a very specific sound that came out of it. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it doesn't work. But I also think that it lost some emphasis because of that. Um, Vocals kind of threw me off. I'm gonna hold some judgment on that for a little bit, but it's interesting hearing the sort of low effort quasi black metal scream growls. Like they're so the thing that I kind of associate with black metal harshes is that they lack the power of more metal growls. Like the growl has a lot of width to it, a lot of impact, a lot of power. Even the stereotypical mainstream kind of fry scream has power and width to it. Black metal seems to be more constrained, almost like a nasally harsh. Obviously they're not doing anything with the nasal passage, I don't think. As far as I know, it's still false chord stuff, but it kind of has that, nasally, kind of constrained feeling to it. That's kind of what I associate with the black metal growl. And I get kind of some of those vibes here, but I also think that it texturally has texture wise, has more of a growl, has that grittier raspiness that you can get down here in the bottom. So it feels like it has that thinness of a black metal harsh, but it also has a bit of that just raw grittiness that we get in growls. And I'm not really sure what to do with that because it feels like a low energy growl, which is an interesting sound. But then it gets paired in the second song with some cleans. And yeah, I'm not sure what to think of this yet. I'm not sure either one of them are doing anything special for the song, at least as far as I'm concerned, but we'll see how my thoughts on that evolve. I do think it's interesting that the clean vocals were paired with the pop rock section, that we didn't hear any of them in the first one, which adhered very closely to a post metal or post rock formula. And then I want to look at this real quick is rhythms, grooves, rigidity. They dance around this a lot in the second song. The first track was just heavy in the rigidity. It was always the strict quarter notes, eighth notes, or 16th notes, and just really hammering this home. And we saw some interesting syncopation when we saw some of the more upbeat pop punk kind of style drumming and bass playing in the second track. And I'm really interested to see where they're going with this. It's wild because there's so many elements of light versus dark here. And I don't mean that in like metaphorical senses. I just mean like brighter sounds and more bouncier things, more bouncier rhythms versus heavier sounds, heavier weights, and more rigid rhythms. And it's interesting to see a band kind of bounce back and forth, but keep the EQ on the brighter side. I want to take a second look at these lyrics, though. I looked at the lyrics a little beforehand because I didn't want to make too many abrupt stops. Oh my God, we're almost at an hour. If I listen to two songs. So the first track seems to be about a dude dying. And there's a lot of comparisons between the body to a tree. because the first verse says the texture of the soul is a liquid that casts a vermilion flood from a wound carved as an oak. It fills the river bank, a sanguine fog. So we already have the idea of, basically somebody's blood leaving their body, and sort of subtly interweaving that into this idea of a wound carving in an oak tree. I'm going to assume. We have ideas of the textures of time is a whisper, the echoes across the flood. So this idea of the passing of time and possibly, like I said, the passing of this person or even the tree. Basically relating everything to nature right here, and how nothing can escape time. Whether you're a higher life form as a human or you're a simple life form like a tree, time will take us all. And the final stanza kind of brings everything together. Earth to flesh, flesh to wood. Cast these limbs into the water. Flesh to wood, wood to stone. Cast this stone into the water. This idea that everything in nature comes back together. And I guess that kind of works with this duality idea. It could be the idea that the oppressing aspect of the post-rock part of the song is, death awaiting, and the uplifting guitar melody is more of an acceptance of the death. But honestly, there's so little written here. there's so little done vocally, lyrically, that's probably the only reading I could get out of it, and it's more of a surface read. But also we're seeing that this idea continues over into the second song, so it could be that this style of music, the bright guitar versus the wall of sound idea, isn't necessarily particularly fixated on the themes of this opening track. It could just be their style. Again, something we'll continue to explore. The second song, that's right. This one seems to continue the idea. So we continue to see an idea of a dying man, or at least now it seems to be possibly a corpse, tying into the idea of a withering tree. And it uses the idea of snowfall. The snow falls onto the tree in a couple of lines, covering it, while when we look at the human or the corpse, I suppose, like I said, at this point in time, it speaks about birds descending upon the corpse, possibly birds of prey, or carrion birds. Is that the right word for them? Anyways, birds that eat corpses. I'm not sure. It doesn't specifically speak to any birds here, I don't think. Any specific bird. But yeah, that's kind of the metaphor that I'm seeing here. I don't think it's a very strong one. I think it's the snow doesn't consume the withered tree and remove it to work back into the circle of life, so to speak. But that seems to be what they're alluding to with the crows. They're consuming the body of this corpse, and whatever's left will be returned into the earth to provide fertilizer and stuff. So I think we started off with, like I said, a bit of a loose metaphor, and I think that the looseness of it really got stretched a bit way too far in this the second song. But I guess we're gonna see where they go from here. So far, the music, the atmosphere, it's pretty good. Digging it. Not necessarily something I'd go explore on my own, but I'm enjoying my time with it. The lyrics are. I'm not here for the lyrics right now. We'll see if that changes. Let's dive into the next track, though. Suppose that's what we're gonna do next, and see what's going on in the white mountain on which you will die. thought that was actually something in the real world. Very interesting sense. Just this low muffled thing that feels like it's behind me. Bit disorienting, sort of otherworldly. I think it works as an idea of passing of the soul from one plane to the next, assuming that it's continuing on with this idea of somebody who dies next to a tree in the snow, which would be the White Mountain. Now we have fire above, ice below. Why do we got a Western vibe? This is a huge shift. Yeah, even the chords have shifted. And I like how we got rid of the drum kit for more of a folk drum. Yeah, they're doing their best to differentiate this as hard as they can. We've shifted from 4/4 to 6/8. We've shifted timbres, we've shifted instrumentation, we've shifted vibe, we've shifted chords. We're using a clean vocal that isn't artificially widened with reverb, or not heavily widened with reverb. There's a bit of a melancholy in here as well, which is an emotion we haven't explored yet. Oh, you know what? The vocals do still have that same amount of widening on them. They're just not as predominant in the mix. Also interesting that they didn't abandon that raspy voice, the raspy growl. And see, whatever guitar tone they're using here for the rhythm guitars has a lot more imaging of the timbre on it, and I can actually hear these chords very clear as day compared to the first track. sounds like they're layering that acoustic guitar on top of the electric guitar so that the timbre of the acoustic can shine through with the chord, and you still get this heavy buzz from the electric. We had a choir in the background for a moment there too. Interesting. I think they had a slight fermata there because that the lone guitar came in like a half of a beat late. I think that's still a guitar, but it sounds like it's being bowed. Really digging into that feedback there. Even with these vocals coming in here, there's still something very calming about this section. In fact, this whole song, despite having that element of melancholy, which I think is still here, it's a very calming song overall. I like the bass movement here as well. Interesting. So they're still utilizing the same style of 3-note groupings as we saw previously in the 6/8. We're in 4/4 now, though, as is very precisely showcased in the drums right here. And very expressive drumming too. Very different from what we've seen previously. The drums are also accenting interesting beats with the snares, really displacing itself from that rigid, constant downbeat attacks that they were doing in the first 2 tracks. We have a windy element here. I think this is going to pull us into the next track. Okay, that's fine. What? Interesting, a 6-bar phrase. Oh, actually alternating between 5 and 6. Interesting, so we have 4 bars of this note. So there's our 6. Now we're gonna, oh. Okay, spicing it up a little bit. It's interesting that they went from the heavy winds into that. I think it was a natural extension of that sound. And they do utilize folkier elements for a lot of their transitions. Here we have another 6 against 4 idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the bass kick and the cymbals are emphasizing the 6, while the guitars are emphasizing a 4. Same with the vocal sections. Really digging into some instability on that second chord. Doing some off-note emphasis there. Very different than what I was expecting from the first track. Yeah, really getting some cool syncopation off of this guitar part. Once again, we can hear that acoustic guitar shining through. I really love this tone. This is a beautiful guitar tone. Especially the way that it contrasts the sounds around it. I was hoping they were going to do another run of that, because that second chord didn't sound as tense as the last time we heard it. I wonder if they changed the progression up a little. So now we're emphasizing that triplet idea here without anything else to work against it, so it feels like we moved to 6. But I'd wager we're still in 4 with just a triplet feel. Might be one of the grittiest tones on the side guitars I've heard in a while. Or I suppose it's a moment that those guitar tones have been allowed to be so present. I love the way the bass cuts through right there. I mean, I love a lot of what the bass is doing throughout this entire song, that's for sure. Bringing back some of these wall of sound ideas. The aggression is back that we haven't seen in a few songs, but there's still positivity to it all. Interesting. I thought we were going to end the song out, but they're going to bring back this hard rock idea from the beginning of the track. Yeah, see, we only did the one rise. Now we're going to do 4 of these, and we're going to do the 2 rises. We're going to do 4 of these, and then 1 rise. And come back down. Yeah, so interesting. It's an 11 bar pattern. 2 5-bar patterns with an extension on the second repetition. Yeah, bringing everybody together on this rhythmic idea. Alright, I think I'm gonna... Okay, they're ending it anyways. I was gonna say, I think I'm gonna cut it off here just in case, because we're moving into, yeah, the final trilogy of the song. So I'm sure that all 3 of those are gonna run together. Everything's on fire. Our fortress is burning, parts 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so some things I want to talk about regarding the last 3 tracks we just checked out. So we had the short 2-minute instrumental, This White Mountain on Which You Die, which was mostly mostly like a textural environmental thing. We had that, let me get that out of the way real quick. We had that whooshing sounds going on in the background. Well, you know what, it started out like this just static humming, and I thought it was something going on. I thought maybe it started raining. We've been having a lot of rain lately, a lot of these heavy showers, and it's really what it sounded like. It was muffled, it was behind me, and it really sounded like, you know, rain hitting the grass outside. Then we had this higher pitched droning sound that was going back and forth, and I kind of said that this is kind of what I would imagine, you know, and it was a very otherworldly sound, like the idea of a soul passing from one plane to the other. I think they did a pretty good job at creating that kind of vibe. I don't know if that's necessarily what they were going for, but the sound is called This White Mountain on Which You Will Die, and we just listened to 2 songs comparing a man's death to the death of a tree. So, I mean, death is on my mind already. You guys have put me in that moment. Now, track 4 is the longest one we've listened to so far, I believe. Yep, 10.5 minutes. Also the longest one on the track. This was interesting because this was, it starts out very Western, kind of, but also kind of folky. Like, it kind of sits in that area. I'm not sure if the Western vibe is kind of, if everybody picked up on that. I think for me it was mostly the timbre of the guitar and the melancholy chord progression that was kind of giving it to me. There wasn't really any element else of it that alluded to Western music, or kind of that sort of bluesy country music, I suppose, is what I mean when I say Western. But yeah, it was putting me in those vibes, which took me far, far away from the White Mountains of this dude's death. It was a very interesting idea to go on, but I think it stands in strong contrast and opposition. Which, I mean, if this album isn't about contrast, I don't know what it is, because we start the album off with 9 minutes, I think, of pretty much solid post-rock, post-metal, wall of sound, really oppressive stuff. You know, not super oppressive. They're kind of going for this lightness to it, but we have that core idea. All the rhythm is really rigid. Lots of tremolo picking, lots of double bass. We have the growls throughout the entire song. If I remember correctly, we don't have the cleans yet. And it sets this expectation up that actually kind of worried me a little bit, because, like I said, I enjoy what the album's doing so far, but I was not looking forward to an hour of slow progressing post-metal with those growls. Not saying it's bad, just it's really not my cup of tea. And it's been such a surprise to see them flip the script on me consistently. but it's been a slow flipping of the script, and I think it's really interesting to see this constant gradual contrast happening. So much so that the fourth song, Fire Above, Ice Below, completely shifts the vibe to something more soulful. It's not even just that they're moving away from the wall of sound and the rigid rhythmic structure to something more upbeat, both musically and vocally and atmospherically and rhythmically. I don't remember if I said rhythmically. Um, they're completely changing the vibe here. The second song shifted the ideas from the rigidity of it to more of a pop punk syncopated kind of upbeat groovy idea, but the core sound stayed the same. This is the first major shift in the sound of the album. We've changed the genre, we've changed the instrumentation, we've changed even core timbres. We've moved very far away from a full 10-minute thing of those growls to heavy use of the cleans. The end of the track does bring back some of those wall of sound tremolo picking in the guitars, but from what I could hear, the electric guitars were pushed down in the mix a bit. They were not as prominent. In fact, at one point when they should have been, or when they were in the same place that they were in the first and second songs, there was an additional acoustic guitar played on top of them in the mix. It was actually louder, and it was attributing more power and weight to the chords being played than that texture, that gritty metal, overdriven sound. And I actually got them confused for a second. I had said that the guitars had come back, but there was more presence to the timbre, and I don't think that's true. The more I listened to it, the more that I heard the twanginess of an acoustic guitar rather than the sounds of an electric guitar, and that's when I realized that they were actually overlaying this acoustic element on top of the electric guitar so that it could have still that staticky texture, but the clarity of the chords, the clarity of the core timbre. Very interesting combination, but also showcases how quickly the heavy noise aspects are getting overshadowed by more of the folky or acoustic elements. As this album goes on, it is getting not necessarily softer, but less noisy. We are seeing the wall of sound elements less frequently. We are hearing the distorted, overdriven guitars less often. The growls are not utilized as often as the cleans are. Now, we still have 3 songs to go. This hypothesis could get completely overthrown, but I think it's interesting to see this evolution of beauty slowly finding a way through the noise. And I think it's interesting both not that we saw it on a micro level with the second track actually bringing some elements of the beauty through, and then in the fourth song where we actually have the acoustic guitar overlaid on the electric guitar, but also on a macro level, watching as the static is slowly replaced more and more in the sound sphere and the overall musical identity of each song. And I think that's what's kind of keeping it all cohesive, because that's a big idea for me. We're going to touch on that in a second, because something I've noticed throughout here is that often we'll have heavy sections, right? And when we want to transition to a new one, we'll get a bar of acoustic guitar or something like that, right? And at the beginning, I thought it was weird. I even called it out a couple of times. But in this identity of the beauty cutting through the noise, or in this idea of beauty cutting through noise, to me, that's sort of moments of the folky aspects, the acoustic aspects, having a moment to, shut down the noisy aspects, the wall of sound, the static, and pierce through it for a moment before being covered back up. And that's, those ideas that really only happened in the first 2 tracks, although I think there was one time in the 4th track that it happened. Maybe it was the 5th. but at least to me, is kind of like the beginnings of this idea. Mostly at the beginning, all we hear is the post metal stuff and little snippets of these acoustic ideas. And then as the album goes on, it's not snippets anymore. It's, integrated parts. And then they're the dominant sounds. And even when we bring back in the heavier elements to make heavier sections, they're drowned out by the acoustic elements. Very interesting ideas so far. And like I said, we still have 3 tracks to go. And those 3 tracks add up to like 20 minutes. So there's a lot of music ahead of us. It could flip this entire idea over. Um, I also am getting very far away from the opening trilogy of comparing the death of a human to a tree. I'm not really sure where we're going with that. Fire above, ice below. Oh, I meant to talk about. I don't even know anymore. Well, we're gonna do vocals for a second, lyrics for a second. A couple of things I want to talk about as well, and before we move into this final trilogy. But anyways, fire above, ice below. I've got no idea. It seems to be making comparisons between blood and ice or snow again. Um, there's ideas of death, and it's only like 8 lines, so there's not a lot going on. But much like with the opening track, there's not a lot going on. It's a very sparse reading. Whatever they're alluding to, they're not really giving a lot of information about. There's a lot of aspect of interpretation left up to the listener, to the viewer, kind of idea. Um, but there's still, I mean, there's still these ideas popping up though. Comparison between nature and humanity, ice and snow, or sorry, ice and blood for some reason, snow and blood, that continues to be a comparison. We have time being brought up, death and sleep and silence being brought up again. So we have similar ideas. I'm still not seeing a connection between all this, and I don't really see much of a connection with the music itself. It seems to be one of those cases where we have a band who makes a specific type of music, and these are the lyrics they wanted to sing with it. Um, I did see a bit of that connection in the first track, but as I'm, quickly seeing, it might have been unintentional or coincidental in that a lot of these songs have similar vibes, right? They're moving through different emotions and atmospheres, but we're still playing within pretty much the same keys through a lot of these. We have the same instrumentation through a lot of them, although we're divvying them up between acoustic and electric. When we bring the electric in, it's the same kind of electric guitar sound that we hear throughout. There are minor variations to it, like that really slick guitar tone we saw in the solo, but for the most part, there is a core identity. There's a core foundational work that goes into all of these, both rhythmically and instrumentally, which makes them all feel very similar. And I don't think there's a lot of room to have lyrical ideas being expressed strongly in the music, which is not a problem at all. Definitely, I think, at least for me, it's more interesting when there's a connection, but I do know that people tend to make music that they know well. It's very rare for somebody to branch out and make music in all sorts of different styles or to research styles that would best work with the message they want to send. So, more often than not, we're going to get music that doesn't necessarily line up with the lyrics intentionally. Sometimes it could be unintentional. Sometimes, you just write. You get vocalists to write lyrics that just work with the kind of music they write. If they're writing aggressive music, they just happen to, play well with aggressive lyrics. And in that sense, there's always going to be that connection. But I think this is one of those cases where the lyrics don't necessarily match up with what's going on in the music all the time. Real quick, I do want to talk about. Where is it? I've written so many notes here. All right, so we talked about the folky transitions, how that's the stuff poking. Oh, the bass. The bass gets more and more dominant throughout this album, and I love it. I think some of it is just that it has a hard time cutting through the static elements in the electric guitars, and the less often those guitars are in, the more likely we are to hear the bass. I don't know why, but I don't know if that's what's causing it. Maybe they are actually EQing it up every song. Maybe it has a purpose thematically to them and they want it to be more prominent closer to the end. But it has some really nice bass lines, and I'm glad that I'm getting to hear more and more of it as this album continues. I'm also interested about the fade outs. Every song ends on a fade out. Every song. It's either one instrument fading into a static noise like a hum or just raw static that transitions us into the next track, or it fades into silence. Everything fades at the end of every song. Not anything that I think is worth, writing home about or really dwelling on, but it's just something that I've picked up on, and I don't know if it's intentional or the composers. They just that's just how they write endings. Maybe they don't have, maybe writing a strong resolution isn't something they wanted to do with this album. Maybe it isn't something that they're great at. Everybody has different skills in composition, strengths and weaknesses, and maybe writing resolute or even irresolute final elements to a song just isn't something that any of them have as a strength. Or maybe one person. I actually don't know. Agalloch could be one person for all I know. Um, but yeah, so it's just something I've picked up on. Not good or bad, just something I can't ignore after having heard it 6 times now, or 5 times. All right, so we're gonna move on now, and I apologize. I can't remember where I was going, and the thing is you guys are gonna be able to rewind it and be like, "Oh man, that's what he was talking about. I really wish you had gone back to." I'm sorry, I can't. I can't go back and listen to what I had said. So we're just gonna carry on, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to run this album the rest of the way through since this is a 3-part set. So we have Our Forest is Burning Part 1, Our Fortress, sorry, not Forest. Our Fortress is Burning Part 2, Bloodbirds, and Our Fortress is Burning Part 3, The Grain, which I think is where the album title begins to take place. We have Ashes Against the Grain. So let's dive into this and finish this album up. I like that low rumble of the wind in the background. Barely audible, but really sets the stage. Interesting. I don't know if it's free time or if they have an alternating phrasing idea going on around. Sometimes it lines up in 6, sometimes it lines up in 7. Yeah, so it's bouncing around a couple of times even. Whoa! Yeah, bringing back some vibes from Fire Above. again, more acoustic dominance here. Hear what I see here? Does you hear what I'm saying about the bass? Yeah, the bass's counterpoint here against the guitar line is just phenomenal. Really like, oh, it was the good. Yeah, we'll get on. I'll write it down. Oh, and a lot of nature environmental ideas going on in here. Build up some energy, but where are you going to take it? Come on, where are we going? You're beginning to introduce a lot of instability in the chord progression. We've got the drums coming in, raising intensity. We've got the guitar in the background. Not what I was that is not what the bass is at its most prominent right now. It is exceptionally clear against everything else going on. We got some nice syncopation in the drums, but it's not driving energy. It's just enough to keep it interesting, just enough to keep it alive. A little bit of an extension of phrase there. starting to see a return to that first style that we saw in the opening track, where we have the pairing of the beauty with the weight. A lot of spaciousness. Drastic change from the wall of sound. We have the timbres of everything we've heard so far, but there's space between all the notes, between all the attacks. And even right here, like, we brought back the tremolo picking. And there's the growls. Yeah, we're bringing it all back together, but in a much more balanced way. And there's that guitar tone that was the solo a couple songs back. Interesting in the vocals. Another idea there where we have 4 of a repeating note, 1 raise, and we return to the repeating note. Bringing back that idea from 2 tracks ago. I really love their melody writing though. They write beautiful melodies. They really do. And we should be going into the final track here, I think. this isn't the first time that they've run sounds, probably normal sounds, through this heavy distortion and delay. But I don't think they've done it so prominently like this, just it being the only thing. It's a pretty lengthy fade out too. The decrescendo's been going on for a while already. Well, at least I can say the album ends as it began, with me really enjoying everything more in the middle. Um, I want to go into the lyrics a bit first before we dive into anything else, especially since I forgot to talk about Not Unlike the Waves' lyrics. Right after we listen to that, I don't really know what's going on here either. It seems to be talking about light, which is a drastic change of pace from what we've been listening to, or what's been sung about before, which was ice and cold and grimness and darkness, dying and bodies being eaten by birds, and really fixating on sort of the bleak element, being on a mountain, a snowy mountain, and stuff like that. And this fifth song talks about light. It's rather small. I mean, as all these lyrical sections are. Aurora swims in the ether. Emerald fire scars the night sky. Amber streams from soul. I don't know if soul. See, because soul is Spanish for sun. I think it's Spanish. Anyways, for whatever reason, though, when soul, when I see that word, I think of sun. I don't know what language that's in. I don't know why I have that correlation, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate in some language. Um, yeah, it says amber streams from soul, not unlike the waves of the sea nor the endless horizon of ice. So it's interesting that it brings about the idea of light, of sunlight in particular, or the amber streams from soul. So yeah, the sun rays, sunbeams, whatever you want to call them, and correlates them to the sea and the ice, which the sea we haven't really talked about, but ice has come up all throughout this album. And then says again, Aurora swims in the ether, emerald fire paints the twilight. And then it talks about the rising sun and moon, and midnight wolves watch over the dawn. The golden dawn, bringing back the idea of sunlight. I'm beginning to think. See, it's interesting because there's a lot of elements in this song that track from song to, or a lot of elements in this album that track from song to song. It seems like it is conceptual on some level, but the lyrics are all over the place. We have the first three songs kind of felt like they all packed together into a single trilogy. The fourth song feels like it piggybacks on uh, vocabulary, right? I don't know that it necessarily works identically, or it doesn't necessarily fit into the opening trilogy, but it utilizes similar vocabulary. It has a common vibe there. This fifth song is completely bonkers in a drastically different direction. Doesn't speak about death at all. Doesn't speak about ice at all, or there is the element of nature. I will say nature is present all throughout. The beginning of our trilogy is an instrumental. The end of our trilogy is an instrumental. The Fortress is Burning trilogy, and the middle of it kind of returns to some of the ideas from the opening. It's just a few lines, so I'm going to go through this. The God of man is a failure. Our fortress is burning against the grain of the shattered sky. Charred birds escape from the ruins and return as cascading blood. Dying bloodbirds pooling, feeding the flood. The God of man is a failure, and all of our shadows are ashes against the grain. And I got nothing here. This is I don't know. Because like the idea of going against the grain is kind of where I thought they were going with the album title "Ashes Against the Grain," uh, would be more metaphorical than literal. Literal would just be taking ashes and throwing them against grain, like out in the fields or something. Like, I mean, I suppose that works because we are speaking about death and nature in half of this album, and that's a return of the body to the earth. But also, that's not the first thing I thought of. The first thing I thought of was the idea of going against the grain, doing the opposite of what everyone else is. And that idea is not coming through much at all, especially in this line where it says, "Our fortress is burning against the grain." Against the grain of the shattered sky. So this looks more literal, the grain of the shattered sky, whatever that would be, whatever the metaphor is. Grain is what gives us bread and rice. It is like a core staple of our food. We can't live without water and bread. Like that's the two staples of what humans need to survive. So whatever the grain of the shattered sky would be, whatever that. Oh, you know what? That might be. Oh man, could we tie this back into the last one? He spoke very highly about sunlight. So would sunlight, this restorative energy that affects us mentally, we need sunlight um, for happiness. There's been studies into that, especially in regions that go weeks without sunlight. That depression is more likely to happen in residents that don't see sunlight often. So there's that. There's also not chemical, physiological benefits of it. Like we get a vitamin from sunlight, something like that. Um, Maybe I don't know. I'm kind of doubting myself on that one because I'm like, wait, that sounds like photosynthesis. Do we really photosynthesize? I mean, we wouldn't turn it into food. I think we do get a vitamin from sunlight, though. I don't know which one it is. As usual, though, that's way outside of my area of expertise. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm gonna just move on and not dwell too much on it. Anyways, so assuming that the sunlight could be the grain of the shattered sky, we are looking at a literal burning against the sunlight, not the idea that our fortress is burning because other fortresses don't burn and it's going against the grain. It's doing, the opposite of what the mainstream fortresses are doing. And then even at the end, it says, and all of our shadows are ashes against the grain, bringing in the album title. Again, not utilizing uh, the widely used phrase, going against the grain. This is a literal grain, it seems, throwing the ashes into the farmland. Uh, so that has completely changed everything that I'm thinking about here because I really thought it was a play on the widely used phrase, and instead it seems to be quite literal. Um, but again, I'm kind of lost here. There's still this overarching idea of nature, but the lyrics, I thought I had a grasp on what we were dealing with thematically, and I kind of lost that around the middle. I didn't really get it back here at the end, and the final track, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Wow. So let's back this up a little bit. Where are we at? Oh, yeah, the final trilogy here. All right. What do I got written down here? We got a lot of stuff. All right, so there's a lot of elements throughout this album I had spoken about. They introduce little bits here and there, and we have like the post metal, we have some black metal, we have some like bluesy country kind of stuff. We have those clean vocals. We have that very sci-fi-esque guitar solo tone that we heard back in track 5, I think it was, Not Unlike the Waves. Um, and we're getting a little piece of everything, right? And I had this idea of the more beautiful, the more I keep saying beautiful, but I think it works better if I say consonant tones, right? Kind of pushes through the more dissonant ones, and we have this element of the song becoming more palatable over the course of the album. And I think it's really interesting though how everything comes together, right? I don't think there is ever a point in the album other than the beginning of track 4 when that was the first time they introduced the bluesy aspect, and I was like, whoa, where are we going? Oh, we also had some electronic elements in here and some samples of wildlife, it sounded like, and wind. And there were moments when we ran some of those sounds through effects. So there's this digital element as well. Excuse me. Um, so, we have all these different components, but for the most part, it all sounds congruent. Everything sort of moves into each other really well. There isn't any moment that I'm thinking, where did that come from? That doesn't fit at all. And some of that is just going to be the fact that, like I mentioned, they utilize the same instrumentation through a lot of the album. They utilize the same keys and chord progressions and tones and styles. When we go to our heavier sections, they are post-rock. They have that post-rock or post-metal guitar tone. We have the constant attacks. When we get softer, we always bring in the same acoustic guitar tones. We bring in the same spacious drum rhythms. We bring in the same style of bass work. When we move into other elements, we bring in these specific ideas. And they're all mixed together and produced in a way that they all have similar qualities to their sounds. So even though the electric guitar that they use, the post-metal electric guitar, is very different from the acoustic guitar, they kind of both have this sort of gray, fuzzy warmth to them. I hope, maybe that one's just me. But they have the same colors, the same characteristics to their tone. They're EQ'd the same way. They have similar effects put on them to give them sort of that hazy kind of feeling. The whole album feels very black and white to me. I wouldn't say there's really any moments of burst of color, and I think that's kind of what ties it all together. Um, is it has this monochromatic vibe to every single aspect of it. And it's just really interesting that we can go from even like so that pop punk kind of style that we heard in like 2 minutes into the second track or something like that, where the drums get very syncopated and we get that bright guitar line. None of that really feels bright and colorful like pop punk, right? I still want to move around, but there's that weighty haziness to it. It still feels black and white, like having snow falling on a mountain while you're climbing it. There's trees around, there's color around, but you know you really don't see much of it. You see the black and the white. You see, the stone of the mountain and the white of the snow. And that's kind of what this whole album feels like to me. There really isn't colorful sections. Even if they borrow colorful ideas from other genres, they still paint them monochromatically. We might get some elements of gray in there, but it's not really blue or green. It's sort of a representation of those colors if we could only work with blacks and whites. And I think that's what holds it all together. But regardless, it's still impressive that they can borrow from so many disparate styles, right? There is no reason that post metal and pop punk and bluesy country should all work together, and yet they don't feel so displaced when they're put together in the order and way that Agalloch has done here. And I think that's just super impressive. I do want to look at specifically track 7, because I think the middle of this trilogy is where everything comes together. The track before it is kind of an introduction to this one, and the track after it acts more as an outro to the album. So I think this is the last major point of the album that I really want to touch on, and I think it's a fantastic finale, which is actually it's going to influence a lot of what I say about the final track when I get there. But I love the way that as the album continues to play on, we move from the 16th note attacks from the post metal style, and we play less and less notes until we get to this track, both 6 and 7 actually, where they are incredibly spacious. There's a lot of space between the notes. The aggressiveness, the urgency is gone. We bring back these sounds. The post metal guitar tone comes back. The spacey guitar tone comes back. The drum, the drum never really changed. We did have that folky drum. I don't remember what track that was. I forgot to mention that. That was cool. It was short lived, but I like how they went in that direction. Um, yeah, but there's a lot of spaciousness between all the notes, and I love how that stands as such strong opposition to how we started, right? Uh, and even within this, though, we still begin to layer. We bring everything back. Every instrument that has ever had a chance to speak on this album comes back in the final 3 moments of track 7, the middle of this trilogy. It's called Bloodbirds. Every instrument comes back, though, and it's really interesting though because they don't bring back the rhythmic style. There's still a spaciousness. It's just that we get the overbearing element that we saw at the beginning through the weight of the journey. We get to feel everything that has come before us in the present. Yeah, I think I might be stretching things there a bit. Yeah, we'll come back to that. I have a theory about how everything's coming together. Um, But I think it's really cool though that they transform the minutia of the song and find a different way to encompass that same vibe that we started with in a different angle, and that different angle is based on everything we've journeyed on so far. We still have the oppressive weight, we still have the melancholy, we still have the bright optimism, but none of it is achieved with just the 2 guitars and the drums. We have 100 more instruments now. It's more nuanced, and I think that that extra nuance gives it extra weight, not necessarily in the gravity of the sound, but just the idea of what it might represent. It is no longer just an isolated moment. It is, a moment that has come from a series of events that all have impact and import to where this album ends up. Uh, Another way of saying that is that it's not a shallow weight, it's a deep one. And I like that. It's an interesting way to recontextualize not just everything we've heard, but even just specifically how the album started. We can recontextualize that same vibe, looking outside the self into exterior influences and how they might allow us to obtain a similar idea through different means and through something that may be a less abrasive initially, but can still achieve a similar vibe. Very cool though. Um, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. And they achieve this through a balance of both of the styles that they've explored. And I think that that's just phenomenal that they can bounce between the heavy, weighty metal side and more of the chill, bright, just sort of atmospheric exploration that they do throughout the rest of the track and bring it together. And instead of doing one or the other, or one overpowering the other, like we saw in track 3, I think it was, we see a balance between them. The yin and the yang have finally become equal. And just a phenomenal way to end out the album. Except the album doesn't end there. it, I'm really glad that track 8 didn't have any music to it. It was textural, it was ambient, it was digital. I'm pretty sure they took probably some nature sounds and ran it through some effects and ended up getting that thing that they got. But I wonder how much of this is still kind of relating back to that idea of the man dying. I'm not sure that the lyrics are still there. There's some oddities in the lyrics in the middle of the album and then the final bit of the album, but they're so sparse. Like I said, I think there's a lot of element of bringing what you have, your interpretation and your biases and your experiences to the table to mix with them, because I'm not sure that they're fully expressing their intentions. It's more of a half expression, and it's kind of your job to figure it out, and whatever you figure out is fine. I don't think that there is an answer. I don't think there's a specific idea they're going for. It's more of a vibe. But I do feel this idea of a man dying, and the album begins with the urgency of this, right? There's the weight of passing, but then there's also an optimism about it. Maybe this person was longing for death or has already made peace with it or whatever. They're ready for their body to, go back into nature. The idea of spreading the ashes against the grain. And one second. But then we spend the rest of the album sort of doing the cliche flashback, right? Seeing moments of this dude's life musically, while vocally or lyrically exploring elements of nature and possibly how these two might line back up. And then we finish off with track 7 of all of these musical experiences, all of these moments in his life coming together to form his purest final movement, which is both a cacophony and a beautiful construction of everything that has happened previously, an element of exploring the past in a single moment, all of the past, exploring all of one's experience in a moment, and actually feeling it all come together. It's not seen as this chaos of information, but as a comforting warmth, a reminder of what has come, and a complete understanding of all that has happened. Whereas the final track would then be the sound of the conscious mind fading away. It's kind of sounds like nature, but it also doesn't. The brain is slowly becoming unable to process the sounds as it runs out of blood and power to process these stimuli and transform them into something that we could understand, until it fades out completely and the man finally is allowed to pass. That's just my reading of it. I don't know. I've only heard it once, and I still have a lot of questions. There's gaps in there. I'm not going to say this is a perfect analysis of the album, but that's what I'm getting out of it on a first listen. My big takeaways, though, is the subversion of expectations. I really thought I was in for a post-metal album. Nothing against post-metal. Post-metal just does not move fast enough for me. An entire album of it wouldn't be torture. I don't want to say that. I enjoy everything I listen to, even when I make weird faces and like, ugh, I still enjoy what I'm listening to. I enjoy listening to music being pushed in new directions or in directions I'm not usually comfortable with, because you can't have an appreciation for music if you hate specific kinds you don't have an appreciation for music then. You have an appreciation for certain kinds of music. So I enjoy everything I listen to. I may not like everything I listen to, but I enjoy it. And that's where post metal comes in, right? I typically enjoy what I'm hearing, but an hour, an hour long of post metal would definitely be a bit draining on me. I'm not gonna say I wouldn't enjoy it, but it would be draining. And they undercut that. They gave me this idea. They're like, yeah, we're post metal. We got a little black metal element in here, and I'm like, oh, the two things that I'm not necessarily going to enjoy an hour of. And no, they flip that script so good, and they bring in all these other different elements, and they bring it all together at the end. And I think it's just a beautiful journey. It really is. Um, and it really makes me wonder: are they that black post metal kind of vibe usually, and this is a progressive concept album for them, or do they always do this? Is that my expectation subversion would not be typical of an Agalloch fan because they already know what they're getting into. They're getting into this progressive post rock stuff. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that, but yeah, I enjoyed this. I think I've pretty much spoken about everything I wanted to. Just an interesting mix of ideas, all sorts of ideas, mixing all sorts of concepts. Atmosphere, width, style, genre, rhythmic concepts, vocals, clean versus dirty, or even I guess another way would be dissonance versus consonance, groove versus rigidity, just all of it. I think they mix it all really well, and they keep it all in a similar style. It isn't something like between the no not yeah between the Bear and Me. Some of their wilder songs where everything feels like a very different idea being smashed together, especially in something like Ants of the Sky, where they're constantly genre hopping and it just feels very disjointed. This, they find a way to sort of shade everything into a similar vibe, even though they're jumping between different ideas or using ideas from different genres in their sort of gritty style. I think it's just fascinating. Those are my thoughts on Agalloch's, what is this called? Ashes Against the Grain. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one. Let me know if you enjoyed it or not. If you have any comments about the format, I'm open to those as well. This is a 2-hour video. I'm not sure how many people are actually making it this far. Is there anything that I could do to cut this down? Should I cut out the reactions and just do the analyses? Should I turn this into more of a review where it's, I listen to it on my own time and script out a response? Or maybe something that's a mix of script and off the cuff where I make notes and kind of extrapolate on them ad-libbed. Kind of like what I already do, just a little more structured. But without the reaction part, so we cut out the music. Also, I might have to do that anyways because there's a strong chance that if not this one, then some future ones are going to be blocked anyways because most record labels are not happy with an entire album being put online. The Between the Buried and Me one was blocked, and I'm going to be surprised if this one's not. So I might have to change that format anyways. It'll turn into the live streams all over again where I'm releasing, putting them on Odyssey anyways. I don't know. Like I said though, I'm open to any sort of feedback on this. Like anything else that I've done on the channel, it's going to be iterated upon. It is imperfect in the state it is, and your feedback will certainly help me craft it into something that is more refined and well executed than it is today. When you're done commenting, I don't even know if I should do this sign off. I don't even know who's going to be here 2 hours later. You guys know the drill, though. We got the link tree thing in the description. Everything related to the channel there. Above that, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'm a bit exhausted after 2 hours of raw analysis here. And if you want to join in and vote on future albums as well as submit your own selections into the polls, head on over to Patreon. It is the newest tier that I've added, and this is going to be something that we do semi-regularly. Right now, I'm looking at every other week until I get into a flow and kind of, just kind of streamline this whole process, and then we'll see where we go from there. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.